Hi everyone, and welcome to the latest in the series of the Earn, Learn, Thrive LinkedIn Lives. I had to practice quite a bit to be able to say that. My name's Rachel Roberts, and I'm an ELT business and mindset coach working with ELT freelancers after 30 years within ELT myself, many of which actually as a freelance materials writer. And I'd like to introduce our guest today, Rhona Snelling. So Rhona is also an ELT materials writer and an editor and a project manager and public speaker. So Rhona, just tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Okay. Hello, everybody. This is the bit where it's really cringeworthy, isn't it? And I just want to send you to my website so I don't have to talk about myself. But after uni, I did
work on that.
Yeah. I'm in the right place for that. But so after uni, I wanted to use my English degree to do something and to maybe travel, because I'd only been on like 2 family holidays at that point, because I'm not from a wealthy background. Then I'd heard about TEFL. I thought, sounds interesting. Did my CELTA with IH, which was just brilliant. Anyone who's been part of your IH as well, aren't you, Rachel? So
yeah,
it's just fantastic. So I had access to all that continuing training, all that massive encouragement to keep creating, trying new things, and to develop materials as part of that. So I got to travel to Italy and Hungary and New Zealand, came back to the UK, and then got a job at Pearson as an editor working on Cutting Edge, and then went to OUP, where I worked on Headway, if anyone's ever heard of that one, which was an amazing team, and actually sort of my benchmark, I think, when I'm writing now, that I really aspire for my first draft to be as beautifully clean and well thought out, and I've already gone through a number of revisions before you hand it in, as good as the source did. Incredible. I did my master's whilst I was at OUP as well, which sort of gave me the push into thinking I could probably do freelance. You know, if I can work full time and do my master's, I can probably juggle a lot of things. And so I went freelance and wrote my first book about 10 years ago. And I've been doing more writing since then. And now writing's my main thing, whether that's course books or webinars or white papers or all the myriad of things that you can do as a material writer. I think Brilliant. That's me.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about some of the myriad things that you can do. Just to say, if you're watching this live, do say hi in the comments so that we can see, because we're over on StreamYard. So the only way we know if you're there is if you say something. And if you're watching later, please do also say hi in the comments. You could put #replay. And if you have any questions, either live or afterwards, because we can come back and look at the comments, please do pop them in. So, when it comes to materials writing, the question that I get asked most often, I don't know about you, Rhona, is, how can I get into materials writing? But we decided that we actually weren't going to talk about that too much, because in fact, there is a lot out there already. And I'm going to write a newsletter based on this talk, and I will put some links in there so that you can go and find out more about how to get into materials writing. So what we want to do really this morning is to talk about what it's actually like to be in materials writing, draw back the curtain and let you have a little peek inside. So I see a few people are saying hi, that's lovely. So we've got Anna, Sylvina, Jinsei, Annie, Fiona, somebody, LinkedIn user. Yeah, if you don't let StreamYard know your name, we won't know who you are, but you can always tell us. Grayson as well. Yeah, LinkedIn user saying, I've just realized I used some of your materials when I first started teaching. A pleasure to hear you live.
Cool.
So very cool. So let's start then by talking about what exactly is involved in being an ELT materials writer. So tell me a bit about, like a typical week for you, Rhona.
Yeah, it's hugely varied. So I think it's better to think about a typical week rather than a day for sure. So my last week's been a slightly bonkers one, which is often the way, I think. So I've been finishing off a draft 1 on a teacher's book. I've been finishing off a draft 2 on another project. In fact, I'm going to be jumping straight back onto that after we finish, because I'm a tiny bit behind with that one. I delivered a plenary for a conference in Peru I say in Peru from the comfort of my own office, obviously.
Yes.
And I mentioned that because that's to support a book I wrote with Macmillan a couple of years ago, so it's related to that. Met arrived, which is always lovely to read, and I've got an article in there, so that was lovely.
Modern English teacher, yeah.
Modern, yes, yeah, thank you. And the sort of icky parts, perhaps, of being a materials writer, I've said yes to a really lovely sounding project next year, pending contract, of course, and I've said no to a project which was incredibly difficult to say no to, but was probably the sensible thing to do. So I've spent quite a bit of time agonizing and calculating and deciding over that.
So what kinds of things do you kind of take, we won't talk about that specific project necessarily, but what kinds of things do you take into account when you are calculating, whether something's worth doing or not?
So in terms of my own reaction, I know now, because I've been doing it for quite a while now, and that there's probably nearly 20 on the shelf. So I know exactly how I respond now, which is I've got 3 steps. It's not scientific. It sounds like it's going to be based on empirical studies, but that's not the case. I'll have a gut reaction and it'll be yep or no. Then my heart will have a reaction, and I'm a bit of an emotional beast, so it tends to be quite excited and like, yeah, this is the best project I've ever heard of, and I love this level, and I think this is really great, and I've got loads of ideas, and I get super excited. And then my head steps in and sort of says, can I just stop you a minute? So the payment terms aren't that fabulous. They're great for the publisher, but you're going to have to wait quite a while to receive them. And it's a staggered payment. You've got 2 extra draft stages in there. Is that covered by the fee? I'm not so sure. And we'll go through all the nitty gritty. And that's the sort of calmer, rational stage. And I do then compare. I always track my time, whatever I'm doing. So right now I'm obviously tracking my time. But when I'm writing, I find that super, super useful, because now I've got a bunch of old fee projects that I can draw on to look at the year I was writing, just to sort of check inflation and how things have changed then pre-COVID, the publication date, the hours it took me for each of those stages, for the thinking about it, familiarization, the outlines, the draft 1, the draft 2, anything that went on in the proof stages, the complexity, because sometimes a teacher's book with 6 or 8 call-outs per page is pretty easy. But if you're writing an exam book and you've got to get your head around those specs and be really familiar with them, to write specific word counts, find good articles, all those type of things, that's very complex. I look at the number of stages, all of that. And from then I sort of break it down into a page rate, an hourly rate, and compare that with sort of industry standards to see how that sits.
And it, experience definitely helps. And I think it can be very hard for people who are just starting out, because you get offered something and that in itself is exciting.
Oh my God, yeah.
And you're like, yes, I'm in. And I do often hear people kind of saying, oh, well, I don't think it's very well paid, but, it gets me in. And I am always a bit like, okay, it gets you into what more? Not very well paid work.
Yeah, exactly. I think if it gets you into learning a new skill and that's going to lead to a better book, then maybe that's okay. But if you're getting into the more of the same, no. But the first, it's interesting, because that was my exact reaction the first time I got an offer for my first book. I was so deliriously happy, and I thought, well, there's no way I'm going to sort of ask if I can have a higher percentage of the royalty or anything, because I'm just so lucky and grateful, and that's true. I absolutely was. To take the project. So you don't know whether you can ask, and you just like shut up and take it, because this is a great opportunity. And the good thing about a royalty is 10 years later, another thing to think about with fees, that I'm still getting royalties for that book, and it's still quite healthy. So if you are getting fee only, it needs to be a moderately plump fee to be attractive, not necessarily a fat fee, but it needs to be fair.
Moderately plump.
Moderately plump.
That's a technical term, isn't it?
It is indeed. Mild to moderately plump.
But I mean, let's talk a bit about royalties and fees. Royalties are becoming much less common anyway. And I have to say, my experience has been very, very mixed. I mean, I've done quite a lot of royalty projects, some of which have worked out very well for me. some of which have been just about okay, what I would have got as a fee, and at least one of which has been considerably less than I would have got as a fee, even after 10 years. So there's no kind of guarantee, because I think sometimes people think if you've got a royalty, woohoo, you're in the money. But it depends, it's a very increasingly small percentage, and it's a percentage of the selling price, which will be different in different countries and could be quite low in the country that you're mainly selling in,
Absolutely.
So you might only be getting 20p a book or something. So you'd have to sell a lot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think you're exactly right. Maybe 20 plus years ago, there was a more golden era for super royalties. And then, you'd probably have a fleet of yachts and it would be a very different lifestyle. But I mean, the big four, so Pearson, CUP, OUP, Macmillan, they're a bigger machine. So they've got the ability to give you a big fee or perhaps a royalty, but they've got all the marketing and the distribution. So you're going to get jolly good print runs, jolly good sales figures. And you can, as an author or potential author, request to know the print run and the sales. And they may share the information with you that they may not. But that is one of the recommended things from Society of Authors. One of their top tips is to ask. You could find out that, and that might give you a little bit more help in calculations. But then, of course,
although it is just a projection.
It's just a projection.
Always come true.
We all know.
But you mentioned the Society of Authors, actually. Say a bit more about that, because I'm a member too, and I think a lot of people don't know about it, and they should.
Exactly. Well, I have to confess, I only joined last year, about sort of 10 years too late, which is sort of typical me. But brilliant. There's a huge range of webinars, and obviously because it's authors, it's everyone. So it's not just educational publishing. So I've gone to a bunch of things on writing for drama, writing for radio, all sorts of things. You get a real breadth of knowledge. But the fantastic thing is that they do a contract vetting service. So you literally ping your contract to them and they'll look through it and come back with a staggering number of points for you to go to the publisher with and discuss. And I have to say, since doing that, it hasn't resulted in me stopping doing a project. It just means that there's been a little bit of tweaking of words. And sometimes the publisher isn't necessarily that aware of a term in there, and they're a bit, yes, that doesn't make sense. That's fine. And it's pretty easy to fix.
I totally agree. I mean, one thing that, I really wised up to, I think with the help of the Society of Authors, is something called a compete clause, which basically says what you are allowed to write in the future, because they don't want competition with that title. Now, personally, I think if it's a fee-based project, you shouldn't be signing a compete clause at all. But even if it's a royalty project, sometimes, the terms are really sweeping. Like, there is one particular publisher where the standard term is something like, for as long as this remains in print in any form. Right. And that is extremely open, because they can use that in different ways. They can put it into new books. You're not allowed to write anything similar. Now, if you actually went to court with that, you probably would win, because it's completely unreasonable, but you're not going to go to court with it, and they know that. So you do need to watch out for these things and question them.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, and they vary as well by publisher. So I've had one which was just 2 years from the date of signing, which is fine. So I'm now starting a competing work, and it's cool. Everything's good. And I had an equally broad one that said, not to produce any English language material. I was like, well, I've got to retire. And as soon as I pointed out to the publisher, we both had a laugh about it, and it was removed. It was an example of one of those things that it's just got in there in the contract from decades ago. No one's really looked at it, and it's fixable.
No, exactly. Well, because I think it goes back to the days, you were mentioning the fleet of yachts, it goes back to the days when you might sign up with a publisher and do a series like Headway, for example, that just runs and runs and runs, and you can have income from that all the time. So it's fine if you're not allowed to write for anybody else, right? But it's not like that anymore, No. So, most writers now will definitely be writing for different publishers. And if you have, particularly if you have a speciality or a niche, you can't have a situation where you're being told you can never write for that niche again.
No, I mean, it's ridiculously unreasonable. And as you say, you know, that would be very easy to argue in a court of law. Definitely.
Yeah.
were you to do that?
Yes, but obviously, you know, you don't want to take it to that, do you? So, okay. So, if there are any, just if you're watching live, do say hello. Many of you have. I can see Maria, Claire, Erica have all said hi. If you have any questions, please do feel free to pop those into the comments as well. Oh, and Sangeeta as well. I've just seen hi. So we're talking about kind of what is actually involved in being an ELT materials writer. You know, what it's like going back to, you know, the fleet of yachts or what have you. I hope really that people understand that nowadays it's not like a key to a magic kingdom where you're suddenly going to earn lots and lots of money. There are certainly opportunities, but you do have to kind of pick and choose. And there's a huge, I think what strikes me that people might not expect is that there is a massive range of what you're being offered. You know, so you might think, you know, we talk about industry standards, but actually, in my experience, you know, the range is enormous. You know, I've been offered projects that worked out about £10 an hour, and I've been, you know, offered projects where I'm earning, you know, pretty good rate, thank you very much, you know, and everything in between.
Choosing your yacht. Even.
Yeah, well, I don't know about my yacht, but, you know, I've had some projects that have paid pretty well. But you might sort of assume, oh, that's obviously going to work out okay. And actually, it's really, really not. And you would be better off working at Aldi, you know. So.
Yeah. I mean, we're laughing, but that's totally the case. You know, I've seen a number of those situations online, and we have to be, you know, strict and look at our hourly rate because, you know, I'm guessing we're all mortal beings. That there may be some immortal beasts amongst us, but, you know, we've only got a finite amount of hours per day and energy. So we do have to assess that, which is why I always track my time. And then when the project's finished, you can look back and review how that was. And yeah, I've got a couple of rates I can give you actually that I checked online, if that's helpful. Let me just
go for it.
Okay, so Chartered Institute of Editing and Proofreading. So they don't have a rate for writing, but for substantial editing, rewriting and development editing, the suggested minimum hourly rate is £36. So that's editing content that's already been created. So to my mind, our hourly rate as a content creator needs to be higher than that. So you've got that.
Happen, but yes.
But yeah, exactly. And I was going to say, but the truth is mine's been considerably lower than that at times. That is the truth. Society of Authors also recommends Andrew Bibby, who's a writer and journalist, and he does an annual salary conversion. So in the UK, the annual salary is $38,000 a year. So there's a chart. I'll put a link afterwards to this so you can review it at your leisure. But to achieve a 38 salary, that would be a recommended freelance day rate of £409 a day, which sounds pretty high, but then you've got to factor in what we don't have, as we're not employees, that is the holiday, the pension, the sickness, the office equipment, the utility bills, the continuing professional development, on all the other things.
Yeah, and marketing.
And marketing. You know, there's so much
out there.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. So I think people do sometimes make that mistake if they're moving over from a salary of thinking that they should be getting the same as the salary, and actually that will leave you quite a bit poorer.
Exactly.
Now, I mean, we've talked here about hourly rates and day rates, you know, just to say, you know, you will, for writing anyway, I've never come across a situation where I've been offered an hourly rate. It will always be some kind of fee. And so you kind of do have to work out yourself whether that's going to cover your time. And if you haven't got the experience and the good records, it is hard, you know, because Grayson is saying, how do you know if a fee is fair if it's not for a full course book, e.g. supplementary course book resources? You know, so, I mean, my feeling is I don't think personally that you should necessarily be being paid that much less, or maybe not even any less, because it's supplementary. material. But it is about kind of judging how long that's going to take. And some of that's in your hands, but some of it isn't. So things like working out, actually specifying with them, like how many drafts, I think can be really helpful, because occasionally, I think one occasion really that I can think of, I had an editor who kind of made me do like 9 drafts of everything. And frankly, it got worse at every draft, because we just went, and then we ended up going back to the original.
I knew you were going to say you'd go back to the original. I knew.
And this was for a royalty. So I kind of, actually, no, sorry, this was not for a royalty. This was for a fee. So every draft I did, I was earning less. So from then on, I have always made a point of saying, right, how many drafts? You know, and I would say, you know, 2, 3 at most.
Yes.
Is what you should be looking for.
Definitely. I think, and that comes on to what's going to be in your brief and your, you know, whatever your contract is, the statement of work, however small that is, that definitely needs to be in there. And just thinking about editors, that's actually one of the considerations that my head does come up with when I'm considering something, because if something's being farmed out to a packager or something, then I'm not interested. If it's staying in-house or it's going to a good, experienced, trained freelance editor, then fantastic. And just thinking about supplementary materials, for Grayson's question, I totally agree with you, Rachel. It's content, they should all be paid the same. The icky thing is that it's the student book that's the cash cow for the publisher, and that's going to bring in the revenue. Teachers' books are normally gratis. You know, teachers want quite a lot of free material, whether that's through websites, resource packs, whatever. And then there's that bigger picture that the reason teachers want that is because they're not being paid that brilliantly either. And it's, you know, there's a whole layer of reasons and complexities. And I think that's why supplementary material is traditionally, usually, typically, unfortunately lower, because it's not bringing in any revenue, or maybe a tiny bit.
I do think that, you know, my feeling, I mean, you know, it's what should be and what is, but teachers' books are usually given away, but that doesn't mean that you should expect people to write them for nothing.
Exactly.
Because teachers' books are part of the package.
Oh my
goodness,
yeah.
They're almost like marketing, really.
Yeah. Yeah,
you know,
and they're also, I couldn't agree more. And they enable you to use the student book to its maximum as well, because I was certainly, one of the things that really struck me when I did my first research trip as an editor was the difference in teaching standards, whereas coming from an IH background where it was hugely collaborative, creative, lots of training, and really fantastic quality, I think, of teaching. And then you'll go to schools where people have had very little training, or indeed none, and they're using the student book without any tools to help them. And they really, really need that help. And teachers
I learned so much in my early career, because I didn't really have much support at all in the early years, you know, and the teacher's book was, you know, my guide and mentor. So
absolutely, yeah.
No. Let's move on then, just to talk about finally about kind of what kind of support you can get, both as a sort of materials writer and with managing like the practical and the financial side. Actually, I've just seen Roz has just thrown a little grenade in there. What's a packager? Right, not come across this yet. So this is a big topic, and in fact I am going to be doing hopefully a live about this coming up, so we don't need to go into too much detail, but basically it's somebody or a company who gathers together all of the people needed, so like the writer, the editor, the designer, and what have you, for a publisher. And obviously they take a cut, and obviously that may not be a good thing for the people who are being employed. Would you agree with that definition, Rhona?
100%. And to my mind, and I don't in any way want to dismiss all packagers, because I'm sure I know there are 1 or 2 individuals who are very good, but as a company, a packager as a company, I don't think there's enough room in the publishing model for there to be another sort of mini pseudo publisher running alongside, and then there isn't enough money there to do that. So people who often are working for packagers are getting even lower rates. And to me, it's a no. I'd love to say something more positive, but certainly my experience of what I've seen, heard, and been approached about has been bad.
Yes, I have not heard great things either. Though maybe there are some exceptions.
Yeah, and I'm sure there are, and I hope there are. Yes.
So, okay, let's just talk a bit about where you can get support then, because we will get into packaging in a further live. No, it's all right, Roz. It's a good question, and I'm sure a lot of people are asking themselves it. So thanks for bringing it up. Yeah, so we already mentioned the Society of Authors, where you can get kind of support with looking at contracts and things like that. I would also recommend ELT Teacher to Writer. You might say you would say that because you've written one of their titles.
They've got some super books.
But they really have got some super books. I can tell you it does not make a very big contribution to my income having written one of those books, but I'm glad to, it's about £10 a year, I think, but I'm glad to do it because I really, I think it's a fantastic range of books that really helps people who are getting into materials writing or who would just want to try something new within materials writing that they haven't done before. And
it's also your development as a writer, isn't it? If you're able to try that new genre and write a sort of writing manual, then that's certainly one of my sort of favourite ways to develop as a writer, to try something that's a little bit new and a little bit different and see if you can apply your current knowledge into that new that new area.
Yeah. And there are also people, writers themselves, who are providing kind of support and training for other upcoming writers. So John Hughes comes to mind, Kath Bilsborough, who's doing quite a lot on sort of writing worksheets, particularly for classroom use, actually, rather than publishers. So check those out as well. And Sophie's saying, I missed the beginning. Are you recording this? Yes, it automatically, you'll be able to watch it on LinkedIn when we've finished. And I will also be writing it up in my newsletter, but I'll mention that again at the end. So any other recommendations, Rhona, for where people can get support?
All the ones that you've mentioned for sure. And I think also it's that thinking about your last live, the community thing, it's having that community of support from other writers who can give you their advice and share their experience of fees of decision making. I've got a couple of good friends that I'm on the phone to as part of my decision making, and that's really useful. And even if it's not an ELT expert, just a friend who knows you well and knows how can see how you're feeling. If you're super anxious and it's making you feel very stressed, then it probably isn't the project for you. It's having that support from community and advice.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Sylvina's just mentioned Peter Clement's blog.
I
totally agree with that. So I'm going to put all of these links into the related newsletter, which will be going out early next week. So if you're not subscribed to the Earn, Learn, Thrive newsletter, do so. And I would also just like to mention that from the 17th to the 21st, I'm running a free 5-day Get Visible on LinkedIn challenge. So, if you're looking for work or more consistent work, do come and join us because it's free and you'll get lots of help, support and community. Sylvina's just put the link to Peter's blog there. That's great. Thank you. Rhona, anything that you'd like to say to wrap up with?
Make sure you've got a brief, or you write your own brief and get that signed off by the publisher, because the brief is like everybody's best friend and it's your constant companion when you're writing. It's going to have those draft stages that we spoke about. It'll have your fee in there. It'll have all the details of what you should be producing. It's good for the publisher because they get the material they need and they can sell and print, and it's good for you because you're not wasting your time. Like those 9 draft stages, dear God, that sounds awful. You've got to get your brief sorted. That's my favorite thing.
No, I totally agree. And actually, don't be afraid to go back, I think, to the publisher.
Absolutely.
And kind of say, hang on a minute, actually, this isn't really what we agreed, or this is ballooned, or
exactly. And actually, in addition to that, I'd also say getting doing, if you haven't done a sample, do a kind of model unit or some outlines, so that you've got that agreement with the publisher that here's where's my head at now. I've read the brief. This is what I'm planning across these 8 units. Does it sound okay? Because you don't want to write 8 units, send them, and them to be inappropriate. So
totally agree. Communication, I would say. Lovely. Well, thank you so much, Rhona. Really interesting to have this chat with you, and everybody who's been watching live, thank you so much for joining us live. And if you're watching later, let us know as well. You could put #replay in the comments, and do add any questions or comments, because Rhona and I will come back and look at them over the next few days. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
And don't forget to subscribe to my newsletter. All right, and I'll put all the links in there too.